Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I'm so excited. We're in the off season. I mean, it's not the basketball off season or the hockey off season or the baseball off season or the lacrosse off season or the wrestling off season, but it's the football off season, which always kind of feels like the off season.
It is, and yet it is. The word season is in there for a reason, because stuff still happens, and it is maybe not as busy as the actual season. The off season still has plenty of news, and it provides for us here and there. This past week was the NFL announcements, and so that's basically what we're going to be talking about today, and then on Thursday's show as well. Today, focusing mainly on the offensive guys and how Ohio State moves on from there. But first time, we should probably just run through everybody that announced and or didn't or will, and then like I said, we'll start with the offense. So Justin Fields, we know he's gone. I know a lot of people were shocked by that. Tom, were you shocked by that?
Totally floored. Okay. Couldn't believe it. To have a guy who's going number 2 overall in the draft potentially leave early. I mean, do you take no pride in your work, sir? You could move up draft boards all the way one spot next year. Yeah, I don't know what he was thinking, but I guess if you're going to get whatever $40 million a year guaranteed or $40 million guaranteed, whatever it is, like, yeah, all right, that's fine. I guess as far as first jobs out of college go, that's not terrible.
When I wrote the story, I had to edit my work because initially I wrote trader Justin Fields turns pro. Of course, I realized trader, I'd spelled it Trader. And then
is that not right?
You know what? Well, I thought, let's just get rid of it and try to be professional about this. Trey Sermon also announced that he was leaving, which is not a surprise. Chris Olave, the big surprise, he's coming back. Jeremy Ruckert, a nice surprise. I don't know if it's a surprise, a nice gesture of faith that he is coming back. Thayer Munford, a few days earlier, we learned that he was coming back, which is huge for Ohio State. Wyatt Davis is gone. Josh Myers is gone. Tyreek Smith announced his return. Tommy Togiai announced his departure. Tom, you weren't surprised by that?
I wasn't completely shocked by Tommy Togiai leaving. I mean, he came on very strong at the end of the year last year, and I mean, he was a force in that Clemson game. And if you are you're really making an impact, a direct impact on a college football playoff game, like, that's a pretty good indication you're probably draft ready-ish. And he's someone who's going to test real well at the combine. I think he's going to be, there is not an official combine, and we talked about this a little bit on the Morning Scoop podcast for Tuesday. It is quite a bummer that we do not get to see Tommy Togiai do the 225-pound bench press to see if he can set the record for most reps on that, because he very well might. But he's someone who's going to test well wherever he does get tested. His production was pretty good at the end of the year. He absolutely could have come back for another year. It wouldn't have shocked me to see him come back for another year, but I think I was more on the side that he might very well go than I think other people might have been.
Over under on his 45.00.
I don't know that it matters. I don't think it really matters all that much. I think the bench press reps, I think the record is 48 or 49. And I think, if you set the over under for him at like 45, I'd have to think about it. He's been someone who for 3 years has been talked about as the strongest guy in the program, like since he was a freshman. So yeah, he's going to be up there. And, sometimes you get those guys who are just the workout freaks and you don't see it on the field. Like you also saw it on the field from him.
3-cone drill, over under 4.89, Tom.
I don't know. I don't know, man. Like, what do you want out of me?
I'm messing with you.
What do you want out of me? Come on.
Haskell Garrett has not yet announced what he's doing, and being a senior, he doesn't necessarily have to announce, because it's just the NFL just assumes that if you're a senior, you are eligible for the draft. The rule this year, though, with everybody having a year of eligibility, the NFL would like you to let them know if you intend to return to college by March 1st. So that is the time frame that we're working with Haskell Garrett. Barrett Browning announced that he would be leaving and turning pro. He's in that same boat as Haskell Garrett, guys who have played 4 years. Sean Wade also announced he would be leaving early. And of course, Blake Hallbeal, Drew Chrisman as well in there. I think that's everybody, Tom. Is that correct? Of the people who made announcements. And if seniors have not made announcements, just assume they are gone, although we have heard that Haskell Garrett maybe having second thoughts. He was one of those guys who was not in the original Senior Bowl or the original Senior Tackle video. And there's been some word on the Ask the Insiders board that he's leaning towards staying. So that's why we bring him up. But anybody else who hasn't been brought up, like Pete Werner, there's no reason to think he's intending on staying or anybody like that. Justin Hilliard has already said, I have nothing left to give to Ohio State. And Jonathan Cooper also announced that he was definitely leaving. Did we cover all of them?
I think the only name you haven't said is Tuff Borland, and I think we're both assuming Tuff Borland probably goes pro as well.
Correct. And so that's the list of names, and we wanted to get those out there. But now we will focus on the guys on offense in this show. And like I said, next show will be guys on defense, and maybe hopefully there'll be more clarity on Haskell Garrett at that point. But Tom, let's start with Justin Fields, who, in my opinion, is the greatest quarterback in Ohio State history. Would you agree with me, or or are you wrong?
I think you have to give it to him. And there's a certain, this is a difficult thing to adjust across eras because, you look statistically, like every quarterback now is so much better than the comparable quarterbacks 10, 15, 20 years ago statistically, outside of maybe Michigan's program. I don't know. But yeah, there's any, the top level quarterbacks in the sport are so much better statistically than they were 5, 10, 15 years ago, outside of the air raid programs, that it's kind of hard to compare across eras. But this is going to be a player who gets picked higher than any other Ohio State quarterback has been picked possibly ever, possibly since Art Schlichter. What did he go? Third overall, fourth overall to the Colts. And, Art Schlichter put up crazy numbers for his era. But, in terms of, if you want to include the whole person, I think Justin Fields clearly has Art Schlichter beat. And, he has been, just in terms of a on-field player, in terms of production, in terms of wins and losses, he has to be right at the top of the list for just about anyone in terms of Ohio State quarterbacks ever. I
saw some discussion on Twitter of this topic, and our buddy Marcus Hartman of the Dayton Daily News was responding to somebody saying, you need to look harder at Rex Kern. And I think he listed Rex Kern as the greatest Ohio State quarterback of all time. And I don't think they play the same position. Like the quarterback in 1968, 67, 69 in Ohio State is not a modern day quarterback to me. That is a guy who obviously running the triple option, throwing here and there. And yes, I guess technically it's a quarterback, but back then guys would move from, fullback to quarterback to center to nose tackle to now I'm going to play linebacker. And so it was, for me, they're kind of different positions in, because I think Justin Fields could have done that. I don't know that Rex Kern could have done what Justin Fields is doing, or what JT Barrett did, or what is required of the arm in the modern day offenses. So as you said, it's difficult to go across eras, but I don't really think about, I can't include quarterbacks that played before 1985 really in this kind of discussion, because the game has changed so much. It has evolved so greatly. And in that evolution are guys who can do what the old timers did, but the old timers I don't think can do what the modern day guys did, because it's never been seen by those people by them before, and so it would be completely foreign to them. And I don't think they could do what the guys today did do. Well,
you've got a whole bunch of changes there. One is the game has developed so far so fast that it's a completely different sport than it was 10 years ago compared to and we're talking about 50 years ago. So it's a completely different sport. Strength and conditioning has come so far so fast. You put half of the middle linebackers on Ohio State's team would be the size of offensive linemen and 50 years ago. They're so much faster, they're so much stronger, they're so much bigger than they were then. And that's all sorts of sports science stuff with nutrition and training and all that kind of stuff. So it really is a different sport. I mean, if you want to look at Kern, when you're judging things across generations, you kind of have to look at like, how was he judged back then? Kern was third in the Heisman Trophy in 1969, fifth in the Heisman Trophy in 1970. I mean, that's right about where Fields was. He was second and seventh, right? And, I mean, there's, you want to compare across, postseason or, big game performance. I mean, Kern threw 5 interceptions in the 1969 Michigan game, and then they lost to Jim Plunkett and Stanford in the 1970 season, the Rose Bowl. So, I mean, if you want to compare across generations, then sure, it's not a bad argument. But yeah, I mean, in terms of just, pure athleticism and all of that, yes, Justin Fields is by far the best quarterback in Ohio State history. And, I mean, he's going to be hard for them to replace just because quarterbacks like him don't come along very often. He would probably have been in virtually every year would have been the number one quarterback in his class. He just happened to come along in the same class as a generational talent like Trevor Lawrence. He probably would be the number one overall draft pick in a lot of years. He just happens to be eligible in the same class as Trevor Lawrence. So, and he's someone who's probably, I don't know if I would bet on him having an NFL Hall of Fame career, but I think he should have a pretty decent NFL career. I think I'd bet on him having a pretty decent NFL career. So I think he's, my hot take is I think Justin Fields is going to do just fine in life. I think he will be okay as a human being and a professional athlete, and probably achieve at least a decent amount of success in his life.
And if he doesn't, he'll at least be rich. And really, that is the one quality that people can't take away from you. So we are both kind of expecting, I don't want to speak for you, Tom, but I'll speak for you. CJ Stroud emerges as he's the most likely guy to emerge at this point, given that he was the backup this year. And no, he didn't throw any passes. And yes, there's going to be a stiff competition this spring, and is probably already going on behind the scenes, and many different things than just what goes on in practice. But assuming it's Stroud, this will be his second year at Ohio State. He will have had a year under Ryan Day in this offense, something that Justin Fields did not have when he arrived in 2019. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for Stroud to have as good of a year as Fields did in 2019, or even better. Because when Fields arrived, he had a crash course and he had to learn it. Stroud knows the offense pretty well. So under Ryan Day, at this point, I just assume the quarterback is going to light things up. And he's had, in 3 years controlling the Ohio State offense, 4 years. 2 of those 4 years, he's had a brand new quarterback, new starter doing it. And those two being Dwayne Haskins in 2018 and Justin Fields in 2019, setting records, being outstanding. And so I just assume that if it is CJ Stroud, or if it's Jack Miller, or if it's Kyle McCord, you're looking at, I think I put on the Ask the Insiders board something like 3,600 yards and 39 touchdown passes for CJ Stroud. How in 15 games? How outrageous is that, Tom?
As you're saying it and setting the expectation of 2019 Justin Fields as sort of the baseline for what we're judging CJ Stroud on, it seemed completely unfair, because that is, you could make an argument that's the best statistical season in Ohio State, football history for a quarterback. Maybe Dwayne Haskins threw more interceptions in 2018 than Fields did in 2019, but it's right up there. And it's like, wow, that's completely unfair. That's really not a real reasonable expectation to put on a guy who's a first-year starter. And then it's like, well, Fields is a first-year starter. Well, Haskins was a first-year starter. It's not as crazy as it sounds. And, he's going to have the weapons around him to put up big numbers. He's going to have the line in front of him to keep him upright. It seems like we should be setting the expectation lower, just because it's kind of unfair to a first-time starter, redshirt freshman who's literally never thrown a pass in college to be at that Justin Fields level, because that was not the level of expectation either of us had for Justin Fields that year. And Justin Fields I mean, we have very limited experience watching CJ Stroud play or throw. So I don't know exactly what to expect from him. And we saw more of Fields in 2019 than we did of Stroud in 2020 coming into the season. And even then, like we watched Fields in practice and it was like, this guy has a cannon. Like this, just the arc of his throws was different from everyone else there. We haven't seen Stroud quite as much yet. And, I don't remember thinking he was, he didn't have a stronger arm than Fields. He might be in the same neighborhood. But, is he as fast as Fields? Is he quite as shifty as Fields? Is he, is he as accurate at Fields? And I feel like we don't quite have all the answers there. But, something in that neighborhood is probably not like irresponsible to suggest. But if he falls a little short of that, that's not like, oh, what a bum. He's terrible. I mean, if Stroud or Miller or McCord puts up 2,800 or 3,000 passing yards and 32 touchdowns and 10 interceptions, that's still a remarkable season for a first-year starter, even though it's not up where Fields was.
No, you're absolutely right. The 3,600 yards over 15 games is just 240 yards passing a game, which doesn't sound like that much in a Ryan Day passing offense, which could be anywhere from, I think Justin Fields was 233 as a sophomore. And the 39 touchdowns is just a touch over 2.5 touchdown passes per game, which also, like, these are all achievable. But again, as you're saying, it's like, well, we only think we know who or what CJ Stroud or any of these guys are. And maybe, Tom, I don't know what happens when you make assumptions, but people talk about it. The over-under for whichever starting quarterback, assuming that quarterback starts 15 games, Tom, I have it 35.5 touchdown passes next year.
I'm going to say under because I think they're going to be rotating quarterbacks, and I think you're not necessarily going to have guys in their whole games. So I'll take the under. I'll be responsible and take the under.
What if I went like 26.5?
I'd go over that. I mean, that's and I mean, we can have the conversation about the responsibility of you just blithely assuming they're going to play 15 games next year. That's a whole separate conversation. But
yeah, we've got time to discuss that.
I mean, even if you just say 14 games, because I think Big Ten champions is sort of
right.
I think Big Ten, appearance in the Big Ten championship game is not a given, but it's something, they certainly have to be considered the favorite right now. So, 14, let's just say 14 games, even 26. I mean, that's, even if it's 13 games, that's two touchdowns a game for 13 games. That seems like more than doable. So yeah, I'd go over 26 or 26.5 for sure. But once you start getting into those mid 30s, it's like, achievable, but not necessarily, just be something I would assume.
Well, and I think the reason I went 35.5, another reason is because JT Barrett's record is 35, which I think he threw his personal record. His personal best was 35 in 2017. Of course, Dwayne Haskins and Justin Fields both outdid that. So I'm not asking CJ Stroud to be as good as Justin Fields or Dwayne Haskins in this one category. But, so Trey Sermon, for me, you're like, okay, well, he's gone. Now what? I don't know, because I have these high expectations for Mayan Williams and just a little glimpses that may be completely out of line. We have seen what we've seen from Master Teague, which is a guy who, coming off of an injury, said he had worked really hard on his agility and felt he was more agile than the year before. And I don't know that we saw that. I don't think we did. And so you're like, well, is he the type of back that can do all of the cutbacks and finding the holes that Trey Sermon showed is kind of necessary in this offense, or to take this offense to the next level? That's the kind of runner you want. Can he be that? And then we saw Marcus Crowley at the end of the season for the first time all year. We have no idea what to think there. Steel Chambers, I still think probably ends up on defense by this time next year during the season at some point. So then you're looking at Travion Henderson and Evan Pryor, the incoming freshman. Have I forgotten any running backs, Tom? Did I get them all in there?
I think you got them all in there. I think that's all the scholarship guys. Unless you want to get into Xavier Johnson or someone like that.
Johnson. But the thing about Henderson, I know people are already throwing him in as a starter. And then, as I said, Pryor as well. Those two guys didn't play high school football this year. Virginia high school football, North Carolina high school football were shut down. They may be playing in the spring, which neither of those two guys will participate because they'll be on campus here shortly. And so I really don't know what to expect from the running backs at this point. And I think I'll need spring to begin to figure it out because, for one, I want to know is Master Teague just the assumed guy? And I do think if I think he will be pushed, but I'm this is one of those things I'm looking forward to seeing. Not that we will see anything in the spring, but just to see what it looks like when we talk to the coaches in May to see, like, tell us what happened. Why is Master Teague the guy? What have you seen from the other guys? Is there a chance that, are we looking at a committee thing? And of course, Tony Alford won't answer any of that, but, just more information, I guess, at this point, what would be a pleasant, nice thing to have.
I don't know that I go into the year expecting Master Teague to be, sort of the default assumption as the first string running back. I think he's someone who, he's talked about working on his agility, and okay, let's see what that looks like on the field. Mayan Williams, I think everyone, they were giving Mayan Williams carries in significant spots. He had carries against Clemson when the game was not completely out of hand. He probably would have had carries against Alabama had he been able to play. Marcus Crowley is someone who you don't have to talk to very many people around that program to find someone who's, has been pretty excited about Marcus Crowley in the past. And he had a slow recovery from that knee injury from a year ago and missed a whole bunch of this year. I'd be interested in what a fully healthy Marcus Crowley looks like this spring. And Travion Henderson and Evan Pryor, you've got people who are ready to just crown Travion Henderson right now and just hand him the starting running back job from day one. I don't know that that's a realistic expectation, but I would like to see it. Let's see what these guys look like in the spring. But Henderson, Pryor, Crowley, Mayan Williams, I think those are four good, legitimate options who any of them could be in that, at least in the starting running back rotation, if they go with a couple guys to start with, maybe in addition to Teague, maybe in place of Teague. There's an argument made that right now, based on what we've seen from Teague so far, where he's just kind of like that one cut back and just, run straight ahead, hit the holes, just knock people over, where his best role is that second half running back where, okay, you're up by 3 touchdowns and now you're just trying to, the defense is tired and now you're not trying to be so shifty. You're just trying to knock people over and move the pile and pick up 6 tough yards. That may be his best role in this team and where he fits in this rotation this year. And if so, that's fine. They're going to have carries for that dude too. So he's not someone who I'm not completely writing him off to that, that's the only thing he can do for this team. But I would like to see more of the shiftiness, more of the cutback, more of the vision that we've seen from some of those other guys before I'm ready to sort of hand him that starting running back job.
I think we saw this year that eventually if somebody shines, then they will get the ball. Like Trey Sermon, even though Master Teague had his injury and Sermon had to step up, I think Master Teague would have still been watching from the sidelines quite a bit because Sermon was unstoppable at that point. And, if you are good enough to get that hot hand, you will get the ball. And it doesn't matter what role you start out in. If you show that you can be relied upon and the defense can't stop you, then you're going to get the ball. And so everybody will have that opportunity. Tom, do you think Ohio State has a 1,000-yard rusher next year?
I think that they do, just because, 2 years ago you had a 2,000-yard rusher in J.K. Dobbins. And even if they split carries, I think someone's going to end up being over 1,000. I don't think I'm ready yet to commit to who that might be. Trey Sermon didn't end up with 1,000 this year, right? No. He was just a little bit shy, but that was in 8 games. That and 8 games of part-time and he blew up obviously at the end, but it was really, it was 8 games, but really it was 7 games, and really it was kind of like 4.5 games. So yeah, I think I don't know who it is, but I think someone is going to sort of end up as that number 1 running back. and that person will be over 1,000. But it wouldn't shock me if this is one of these years where they have 4 guys with 250, 300 yards, something like that.
Yeah, I'm feeling no on the 1,000 yards right now. If we're using your hater schedule of just 14 games, you're talking a little over 71 yards per game, which certainly not out of the realm for the guy who is the starter and gets 13 carries a game. 13 carries a game. I think that's what, like, 6 yards per carry, which they should get. It's just, can you play every game? Do you miss a couple of games, or are there games where you are quiet, you don't have any big games? So I'm gonna say no for now, but ask me again in May. Can you mark that down, Tom?
I will set a notification on my phone to ask you again in May. Yes. And here's the other question that's sort of the underlying question mark under all of this. What are we assuming in terms of, like, what's next season going to be like? Are we assuming that there's going to be the daily COVID testing, or are we? I'm sort of, in my head, I'm sort of building in they'll probably all be vaccinated by then, and then it probably won't be an issue, and you won't have guys missing 3 weeks for you pop a positive test and then you have to sit out 17 days. My assumption is, and maybe this is just the optimist in me, but my assumption is you're back to a closer-ish to normal setup next year. I don't know if that's 100,000 fans in the stands, but it's probably guys are going to be vaccinated. You're close-ish enough to herd immunity. I mean, I've read some stuff from, various kind of national reputable outlets where they talked to a bunch of people, and they were sort of estimating like early fall is when you're sort of back to normal-ish. So hopefully that's true with the football programs as well. But that is the assumption that is sort of underlying all of these predictions. And as we have seen, predicting events 9 to 12 months out, it is an extremely, extremely accurate business to be in, with absolutely no downside, and nothing that you could possibly have that was unanticipated. Thanks
for bringing this up, Tom.
Yeah, well,
great job by you.
See, I'm the optimist. I'm saying it's going to be closer to normal. So these are the asterisks you have to apply to these conversations at this point.
If you have to push the season back a month to get everybody vaccinated, please do it, so that we don't have to worry about any stoppages or anything like that. What I would ask, even if there is, say not everybody is vaccinated, but we're on our way, don't leave it up to teams to cancel games anymore. Can we get rid of that? Because if you give teams an opportunity to cancel games, what we learned this year is they're going to do it. So take that away from them.
And there needs to be a national standard. Like, there has to be. You can't have, if you're a Big Ten team, you're getting tested this often, and the tests are getting run this many times. And if your guys are out, they're out this long. And if you're an ACC team, you're getting tested half as much. And if you're out half as long, and the tests are going to be, 80% less sensitive to the virus. Like, you got to have a consistent national standard on this stuff. Like, there's no reason you can't have a consistent national standard on this stuff if you do have to go through this whole thing again next year. Which, oh boy, please, let's not have to go through all of this stuff again next year. But if they do, let's have a nice standard national response level that everyone's okay with, that is the concise sort of the agreement of the experts, rather than we'll just everyone will have their own separate rules, and then what could possibly go wrong? How could that possibly hamstring anyone in major key spots?
I have faith that the NCAA
sorry, let me let you finish.
Thank you. I have faith that the NCAA will step in and create rules that are fair for everybody. What do these rules entail? Well, since the smaller schools can't afford to test more than once per week, then no school should be allowed to test more than once per week. And that's how it will be. And everybody will be happy with that. Just one test a week. And because it wouldn't be fair to the smaller schools if you test every day. And so that's what the NCAA is about, is fairness, and safety of the players is secondary to that, which I think we all know. So, Tom, I know you are a cynic when it comes to the NCAA. I don't think you should be. I think the NCAA has done a lot of good things. One of those good things is maybe like just staying out of everything last year, and maybe by just watching, they can learn how to fix the issue this year, should it become one, which, Tom, let's hope it doesn't.
The NCAA is going to institute a rule that if you test positive, you lose your name, image, and likeness rights for 24 months. That'll be, I don't know what the rest of the plan will involve, but that will be part of the plan. So
the rights revert back to the NCAA for 2 years.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And that's because hey man, that's on you. That's personal responsibility, what have you. Yes. Yeah. That's I don't know that it would have been better with the NCAA in charge of everything, just because the NCAA can screw up a 1-car funeral, but at the same time, I don't know that it could have been handled much worse than it was. So, about the worst thing I can say to you is I don't think the NCAA could have done anything worse than you did. So there you go. I guess the NCAA might be able to do it better, and probably couldn't have done it worse is probably the worst thing I could possibly say about how this whole thing was handled last year.
Damning with no praise. Good job. Let's turn to Chris Olave, who, as I said earlier, kind of shocked everybody by coming back. And I said this on the Morning Scoop. Like, I never really considered I never put that thought into my mind and considered, who might be coming back, who might be staying. I went through that with almost everybody else who had actually a decision to make. With him, I just assumed he was gone. Never, when I looked at next year's passing game and next year's receivers, I never included him in there, I don't think. And Julian Fleming's at the Z next year, or do they decide they want to put Jameson Williams there? And you're trying to move all these pieces around, and I never had that piece put in there. And one of the interesting things, and I got this from from a couple of people, basically as soon as he announced, they're like, "Oh, what does this mean? Is anybody going to transfer out?" And it's like, just calm down. Like, and anything that Chris Olave does next year is going to be better than anything that anybody else would do next year. So this is a good thing, him coming back. And I don't see anybody leaving because of it, because as we've said before, Tom, I expect more of a rotation at receiver next year as more guys become reliable, and as the number of tight ends that are counted on gets cut in half, basically, I think. And so there will be enough footballs to go around, but this is huge for Ohio State. You have possibly the best receiver in the nation coming back, the best deep threat in the country. Everybody's going to have to worry about him. And you almost forget Garrett Wilson is still on the team.
I didn't forget Garrett Wilson was still on the team. When you said the best receiver in the country coming back next year, I thought, which one is he talking about? Could be a couple different guys. It's a monster. It's just huge. It is. I asked on Twitter, like, who is the most beloved person in Ohio State football history? Like, not the best, just the most beloved by the Ohio State fan base. And, will Chris Olave be that person in 12 months? Because I think he could be, if he has a big year and has, sort of the storybook ending to his career after everything he's gone through. But yeah, you put him and Garrett Wilson and Jameson Williams and Julian Fleming and Jackson Smith and Jigba and G. Scott and Emeka Egbuka. That's 7 right there. They like to run that 6 wide receiver rotation. I think they're going to have a 6 wide receiver rotation. I think you could do it with the guys who are returning players. And then you have Egbuka kind of work his way into that rotation potentially at some point. They can go 4 wide. As you said, you're not going to see the 12 personnel you saw this year. You saw a ton of 2 wide receiver two tight end formations, because they had 2 tight ends they really trusted, and I think the wide receiver depth was not quite where they normally would like it to, because they were relying on so many freshmen. And you had some of the older guys. Jalen Harris was out all year. He was unable to play this year. Elijah Gardner, I think, fell into the Springfield mystery spot. I haven't seen him in months. So, you've got the guys who were sort of the veteran guys are just like gone. So they weren't quite at the point where they'd like to be with wide receivers. This year, I think they should be. You've got 6, 7 guys at least who are people who I think they can feel like they probably can rely on, or will be able to rely on partway through the year. Those guys, and a lot of those guys, have probably been working with CJ Stroud and Jack Miller a bunch during practices. They've been getting the reps with the 2s quite a bit during practices. And you're starting to see some of them already play. You're seeing Julian Fleming playing a little bit in the playoffs. You're seeing, you said Jackson Smith and Jigba getting I think he had catches in both playoff games. I mean, he's, you know, this is probably not the first time we have mentioned this, but I think Jackson Smith and Jigma might be pretty darn good for this team in the coming years. So you're getting to the point where you don't have too much depth, which, I mean, there's a question of whether you even can have too much depth, but they don't have too many guys. They probably have just about the right number of guys. And then, you know, you got guys, you know, Ballard, Marvin Harrison Jr. coming in. Like, those guys are going to work their way into the rotation, but you don't need a true freshman to immediately be an impact player. And then a year from now, Olave is gone. Garrett Wilson has the option to leave. Jamison Williams potentially has the option to leave. And then, you know, and then you then everyone takes one step to the right, and the band plays on.
And who knows what we get from what we see from Cameron Babb next year as well. But, you know, I'm trying to put this depth chart together, and I have no idea who's going to be moving around, because you could initially just say, well, the starters remain the same: Olave at Z, Garrett Wilson at X, Jamison Williams at X, Garrett Wilson at H, and then Julian Fleming stays at Z, G. Scott stays at X, Jackson Smith and Jigma stays at H. I mean, that's seems pretty cut and dry there. But they want their best three. Does there become a new best three, new best four? And so that'll be interesting to watch, as guys, we saw Jackson Smith and Jigma and Garrett Wilson both play outside as well. So there'll be some moving pieces and parts. I think when we talked about this a little bit in the morning, on the morning show, is that this is also a testament to Chris Olave's faith in the quarterback next year. Because I don't think he'd be coming back if, say, to just a random name like Joe Bauserman. Like, if the quarterback was of that, you know, unproven type, and again, I've insulted him terribly at this point just by using him as this description, but if it was Joe Bauserman coming back, I don't know that Chris Olave is going to be all that inspired to return, even with the draft prospects being where there are certainly 3 or 4 guys ahead of Olave this year, and he comes back, he can improve that, but you can't improve it if the guy can't get you the ball. And so he clearly believes that whoever the quarterback is going to be able to get him that ball. And so I think that's a good sign for the Buckeyes, certainly.
Well, and it doesn't even have to be Joe Bauserman. I mean, this is an example you brought up on the Morning Scoop, was, you know, Brian Hartline leaving when it was going to be Terrell Pryor's show in 2009. And Terrell Pryor was a great quarterback, just like Braxton Miller was a great quarterback. Wasn't necessarily a great passer, especially early in his career, for both of those guys. The guys, I think you're seeing guys coming in a little more refined in terms of their passing skill, their passing acumen, their knowledge of the game. And also Ryan Day is a better quarterback coach than Nick Siciliano was. There, I said it. Okay, fine. I said it out loud. All right. I hope everyone can forgive me.
It's like we got a title for this show.
Yeah. My hottest take ever. Yes. I mean, you've got Ryan Day, you've got Kevin Wilson, you've got Corey Dennis. Like, these are guys who have very consistently shown, like, okay, seems like the quarterback production is pretty good, whoever it is. So, and it's not like they're just relying on one guy. There are 3 very good, highly ranked recruits in that room right now, or will be when Kyle McCord shows up, that, you know, you're not throwing all of your eggs in one basket. It's like, well, if these guys who have shown they can develop a quarterback very consistently to an outstanding level can develop one of these 3 guys to an outstanding level, things will be fine. And you can read that as a vote of confidence in one or more of the young guys. You could read that in a vote of confidence in the coaching staff, or maybe both, because I think there's a decent chance that it is a vote of confidence in kind of the whole operation, the whole organization.
I didn't realize how close he was to breaking all of those records, the receiver records that you mentioned in the Morning Scoop, and it was like 91 receptions away.
91 more receptions, 1,124 yards, and 13 touchdowns.
Yeah,
so that's KJ Hill's receptions yard record, Michael Jenkins' receiving yardage record, and David Boston's touchdown receiving.
And we're talking 6 receptions a game with that 15-game schedule, which doesn't seem outrageous. Certainly doable. I don't expect it to happen just because it so rarely does. I think the other 2 are, I'd almost call them locks. As long as he plays 13, 14 games, I think 1,100 yards is about the minimum of what I would expect. And certainly over 13 touchdowns, I think, is doable. If I put 12.5 touchdowns as the over-under for Chris Olave in a 14-game season, where are you going?
I mean, I think you have to. I mean, if he's healthy and they're playing a 14, 15-game schedule, I think you've got to think he's going to break that one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're gonna bet against him having a touchdown catch a game? Like, I don't think so. Now, I mean, the receptions record, he needs 91 more catches to break the receptions record. The school record, I'm just looking it up, was 90. That was Paris Campbell in 2018. And Olave is not the kind of guy that's getting those little cheapies on the little toss plays. So that's probably too much. But like 1,124 yards, 13 touchdowns, like those both seem extremely within range for him.
Chris Olave, and I just looked this up, in his last 24 games, Tom, do you know how many touchdown catches he has?
It feels like the answer should be about 21.
It is 22, because he's had 19 in the last 2 seasons, and then 3 in the last 3 games of his freshman season.
So 22, by 22, you mean about 21?
No, I meant 22 exactly, Tom. If there's anything we do on this show, it is be precise, as I struggle to say the word precise. So that's pretty remarkable. 24 games, 22 touchdowns. You extrapolate that into 14 games, and I believe it becomes not quite 22, but somewhere above 12.
Yeah, 13, and yeah, I mean we'll round up to 13. Like if he finishes next year with 12.8 touchdowns, we're going to grant him that record. Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
Homer, whatever. So yeah, I feel like those are pretty probable, except for that 91 catches. Tom, let's move to Jeremy Ruckert. As I mentioned on the morning scoop, as soon as he came back, I said, that's it. It's definitely going to be the year of the tight end in 2021. And then five hours later, Chris Olave came back, and it was like, womp womp. No more year of the tight end in 2021. But year of the tight end at Ohio State is a relative term. It could mean many things. And I'm looking at, down in the history, and you go to the record books, and the Ohio State record for tight end receptions is like 55 or something. And I'm not saying he's going to get anywhere near that. Billy Anders in 1966, 55, John Frank, 45, a couple of times, Jeff Ellis back in the 80s, 40, Bob Grimes in 1952, 39. However, Tom, in modern day football of Ohio State tight ends, things are a little bit more doable. I mean, Marcus Baugh had 28, I think, one year, 26 another. But let's go to Ben Hartsock, who had 33 in 2003. Ricky Dudley had 37 in 1995. So with Jeremy Ruckert, I'll go the Ben Hartsock route, and we'll say the best of this century has been 33. So I'm going to set the over-under for Jeremy Ruckert, Tom. For you, 33.5 catches. Where are you going?
If history has taught me anything, the answer is always under with Ohio State tight ends. Now, 33 is like a little under 3 per game for 12, 13 games. I mean, that's, I don't necessarily see a game where he gets like 8 catches. So then you're asking, is he going to have 3 like every single week? And I think the answer is no. I'm not. This is the most remarkable thing here. I actually have to think about this one, like with a reasonably high Ohio State tight end receptions over under. I actually really have to think about it. I'm going to go under, but like 30 catches for 400 yards and 8 touchdowns, something like that. I mean, that seems about right to me, right?
He doesn't need to get 3 receptions every week. He just needs to make sure it's every other week. And the weeks that he doesn't, he gets at least 2, Tom. And then he'll make it just fine by like 1 or 2. So I'm with you. It's hard to go over on anything unless it's like, well, if I give you Marcus Baugh, which is 26 or 28, or Jeff Hireman even had like 26, and Jeff Hireman is playing at the same time as Nick Vannett. It's like, well, why wouldn't Jeremy Ruckert best those numbers and be in that range? And 33.5, I think it's impossible to go over that right now, just out of, as you said, a sense of history and Ohio State knowledge, even with the fact that Jeremy Ruckert is going to be a valuable part of the receivers. But if there's 6 or 7 other guys they're throwing to, then by mathematics, there's going to be fewer for you. And so to expect 35 or something like that, I'm not going to do that. Although I'm sure some people out there will say 45 or 50. More power to you. Keep on believing. Keep up the fight. The year of the tight end will eventually be here, and we'll all be happy because of it. But again, fewer 12 personnel sets, so he's going to be out there more often, but also more 3 receiver sets, so there's going to be other receivers out there as well. And I think it just comes down to, Tom, how often he is the number 1 or 2 read.
Well, and a young quarterback, is the young quarterback going to be looking for the check down more often? Maybe. So get the ball out of his hand. They don't trust him to do quite as much. So maybe there you've got the tight end sitting in the flat, or the tight end just on a little crossing route or something like that. Maybe if that's the easier throw, the easier read, maybe you see that from a younger guy quite a bit. But I just pulled it up in the game where the historic, mind-blowing Ohio State three tight end touchdown reception game against Clemson. Do you know how many receptions the tight ends had overall?
4?
5.
5.
So yes, 5 receptions for Jeremy Ruckert had 55 yards. Luke Farrell had 11 yards. So 5 receptions for 66 yards, 3 touchdowns. This was the mind-blowing. Ohio State has finally pulled the bubble wrap off, and finally is breaking out the tight ends in an unprecedented way. 5 catches for 66 yards. So yeah, I'm just this is a little like Master Teague. Until I see otherwise, I'm going to bet the under on the tight ends, and until I see otherwise, I'm going to assume that Master Teague has not developed a completely new running style.
But be positive, Tom. Maybe the Buckeyes won't be able to run the ball next year and have to throw it.
I think they're going to be able to run the ball, because I think the offensive line speaking of transitions, boom. I think the offensive line is going to be pretty darn good next year. So I think they probably will be able to run the ball enough to not have to lean solely on the tight end passing offense.
Right. And let's talk about the offensive line, those guys who made their decisions. And let's start with the only true Buckeye of the 3, because Wyatt Davis and Josh Myers both turned traitor, as we know.
Mm-hmm.
Thayer Munford has said, you know what? I want to come back one more year, be a 4-year starter at left tackle for the Buckeyes, which is pretty incredible, even though it's not the standard way it is done. But, here he is. He's back. Another surprise, because we announced it for maybe Saturday, but it wasn't announced. It was found out on the Ask the Insiders board on Wednesday, I believe, that he was coming back. And so reading that, I was shocked, and I'm still a little bit surprised. And it's a good surprise, because this is a guy now, if you almost feel like the quarterback at this point, whoever it's going to be, is completely spoiled, like an only child getting everything they want. Mommy, Daddy, I want a starting left tackle who's a 4-year starter. Oh, okay, sweetheart, we'll get you that. And then, now Thayer Munford's not allowed to go to the NFL because he has to be the left tackle for this guy. Chris Olave, he's trying to go to the NFL, and it's, Mommy, Daddy, I want a deep threat. And so then Chris Olave has to be kept around. And so the number of guys that stuck around on offense, is Thayer Munford the most important?
I don't know if he's the most important. He might be, because I think there's an argument to be made that Ruckert is the most important, just because they don't have, the step down from Thayer Munford is Paris Johnson, who I think we both think probably could handle a starting tackle spot next year. If there was a starting tackle spot next year, the drop off from Ruckert to Cade Stover, Joe Royer, Sam Hart. I mean, those guys, they all may be fantastic. They're just completely unproven right now. I feel like we know more about Paris Johnson than we do about any of those guys. So yeah. I will tell you that you're wrong, and you should feel shame.
I was asking you a question. Shame. I wasn't making a statement.
You should feel shame for your bad opinion. That's okay. No, it is monstrous to have him back, because this was maybe one of the top tackle tandems in the country, and all the other top tackle tandems in the country have their guys leaving for the NFL right now. So you've got Petit-Frere back, you've got Thayer Munford back. All of a sudden, okay, so you just don't have to worry about that. It's okay, that's fine. As long as those guys are healthy, okay, you don't have to worry about either of your tackle spots. And that's one of those spots where, that can blow up a season. If you have one tackle spot that's just completely just not functional. Like a bad offensive line or a bad defensive line can completely short circuit what is otherwise a fantastic side of the ball for you. And it's just not a thing for Ohio State. You got Harry Miller, returning starter. He moves over to center. Yes, he will get the snaps figured out. It'll be fine. You've got Matt Jones, probably at one of these starting guard spots. I mean, and we're not officially awarding these positions yet, but Matt Jones sure looked good. Matt Jones stepped in and played he looked good in the semifinal game. He looked good in the national championship game. He looked good against Michigan State. Like, he was like fine. They were fine. So I think that's not really a concern. You get Paris Johnson, who stepped in, and whenever he was asked to step in, like, he was fine and has the pedigree to make you think that, yeah, he might be better than fine pretty quickly. So you've got five offensive linemen you're probably feeling pretty good about, including 2 returning starters. I mean, and as you said, the wide receivers, the running backs, like, I don't know who's the starter, but I know the starter is going to be a real good football player who is, has defeated a bunch of very other good football players to be the starter. So you'd have to have a pretty decent amount of confidence in there. What do you say, whoever the starting quarterback is this year, we nicknamed them Silver Spoons. What do you think? He's kind of riding a train around the living room, whoever it is. I mean,
but that's the dad. And you can't is his nickname the Silver Spoons dad? The dad from Silver Spoons? CJ, the dad from Silver Spoons, Stroud. When CJ is already a nickname. If a guy has 2 nicknames, that's a lot of pressure, Tom.
Or he's in the mob. That seems like that's
That's true.
Not that we're accusing anyone on the Ohio State offensive line of being part of La Cosa Nostra.
No, certainly not.
No.
I'm just trying to think. Are there any names there that no.
We'll have to. Good news. We have a long off season to workshop this.
We can. Yes. Let's see if there's any other major crimes we can accuse future President Buckeyes of. We've got all summer. It's going to be great. So yeah, you pretty much already went through then Wyatt Davis and Josh Myers, Tom. So thanks for that. But you think about it, and you're not just returning Thayer Munford. You're also getting Max Ray and DeJuan Jones. They started that Michigan State game, if I'm correct, at tackles, right?
Yes.
And so, assuming those guys are both back, I do think Paris Johnson steps in for either Wyatt Davis or Harry Miller at one of those guards, and Matt Jones, however they want to do it. Do you want to put Paris Johnson at left guard because eventually he'll be the left tackle? Maybe so that he can just, the hands stay the same, that sort of thing. DeJuan Jones then, to me, becomes the Brandon Bowen swing guy who can play tackle or play guard, come in. He's basically the 6th guy to come in wherever you need him other than center. And that's either Luke Whippler or Matt Jones. I assume at this point they will actually have a backup center who is the actual backup center and not one of the guards. And so that will be a little different. They did that kind of the year before as well, but you're really deep again on the offensive line. We saw how much they needed it in a crazy COVID year. They shouldn't, knock on wood, need it for a typical year, but they're sure as heck going to be happy to have it.
Well, it's just one of those things that you don't necessarily need it, but they're like lifeboats. Like, you generally don't need them when you're on a boat. But if you do need them, boy, howdy, do you need them. So you really want to make sure there's lifeboats on the boat when you get on the boat. And you really want to make sure you don't have one of those like late Jim Bowman era, like, well, the starting left guard is also the backup right guard and the starting right tackle is also the backup center. Like, that just, you're at that point, you're rearranging deck chairs and it's like, you can move these guys around anywhere you want to, but there's still only 4 of them and you need 5. So that's a problem. Like, that's not good. So you don't need like 15 guys who you're ready to play immediately, but they have to have 8. You have to have someone who is not in the starting lineup who can step in at each of those 5 spots. And a lot of times it is just like, you have the Josh Olavey who stepped in the Rose Bowl a couple of years ago when Munford got hurt. Munford had that back issue, missed the Rose Bowl, and just like, oh, look at this. We just have another guy we can just plug and play at tackle and win the Rose Bowl. Like, that is not a luxury that every team has. You saw Michigan this year, like, they had both of their tackles out and it was just like, it immediately just turned into a complete fire drill for them all season long. Ohio State was missing 3 offensive linemen at Michigan State. just like, okay, well, now there's 3 new guys in here, and let's go score 50 points against a team that beat Michigan. Like, sure, like absolutely. Absolutely beat the team that beat Michigan and then you beat them by 6 touchdowns with 3 new offensive linemen. Like, that's not something you need to be a functional football team. Like, you can go 8-4 in the Big Ten and have only 6 offensive linemen on your roster. If you want to win the Big Ten, like, stuff happens. Like, I should not have to explain to you after the last 12 months. Like, yes, sometimes stuff happens, and you need to have that plan B in place. This is, again, when we talk about the depth advantage that Ohio State has. Like, the top line talent at some of these schools, at Penn State, Michigan, is not totally dissimilar from what Ohio State has in a lot of places. It's that second level down. Like, once those top line guys are gone, then what? Do you have a top 100 guy like Max Ray to just sort of like throw in as your fourth tackle and then just be completely fine? Or are you throwing in like, well, there's a walk-on who's been here for 5 years, and I guess, I mean, someone has to stand there. Like, that's the difference between beating Michigan State and winning the Big Ten and going to the college football playoff and losing to Michigan State. Like, that's it. That's the difference.
Yeah, you mentioned I had completely, with my focus on Ohio State the last month, had forgotten about that Michigan State victory over Michigan. So hopefully if anybody else had forgotten about that, they now are reminded of it and they're smiling a little bit.
You're welcome.
Brought some joy to your day. Yeah, you're welcome. Boy, how do you lose to Michigan State? But you kind of explained it a little bit, where positions you just don't have any depth, and maybe one of these days we'll do a Michigan show again, because there's a lot going on there, and also maybe a Tennessee show, just because those are fun, and we've never done one, and there's a lot to talk about. And Tom, real quick about Tennessee, because we have wrapped up our offensive look. The thing you have to be careful about as they fire Jeremy Pruitt for cause, when you take an SEC coach's money and say you can't have this because you cheated, you are giving him free reign to just spill the beans on everybody. And so this is a thing you mentioned, La Cosa Nostra. That's something that they tend not to. They don't like to do that in the SEC, and so I wonder, will the other schools come together and be like, no, Tennessee, you better pay this guy. Just enough with the for cause. Just go ahead and pay him, please.
Follow-up question: will the money be in a McDonald's bag in the buyout? Yeah, that's. I mean, boy, we could do an hour on Tennessee and what's going on there and the leadership there. My personal favorite part was where Phil Fulmer was having a press conference on Monday, talked about the fact they were firing him for recruiting violations, and then talked about the fact that, well, I mean, the recruiting has been good. Like, yes, that's actually why we're here. Yes, go on. My personal shock, I mean, my shocked to find gambling in this establishment face was when it turned out that Tennessee's multiple decades of on-field failure and complete inability to develop players was not, in fact, what was behind the recent recruiting success. I couldn't believe it. Like, Alabama gets a guy, Clemson gets a guy, Ohio State gets a guy. It's like, yeah, there's a whole bunch of reasons to go there. Like, why the heck are you going to Tennessee? Why were you going to Ole Miss under Hugh Freeze? Like, there's nothing, there's nothing there that indicates like this is a place that's going to develop me to become a great like, no. And you had a bunch, you've got a bunch of programs that sort of fall into that trap. Texas at least has the brand name, but it's like, if you're going to Texas, it's like, all right, well, the last decade, like, okay, are you going to be an accountant after you graduate? Are you going to be you going into finance? You're going to go be, you're going to go into corporate communications, because you're not going to the NFL because they don't develop you there. So yeah, that's, it's always fun to see, the shocked to find gambling in this establishment programs, who are then shocked to find out that, hey, at least recruiting's been good.
Yeah, at least in Texas, there are Texans who grew up wanting to play at Texas.
Correct.
At this point, because it's been so long since Tennessee has been good, I don't know that anybody has grown up in the last 20 years who wanted to. I just want to be a Tennessee Volunteer. And I'm sure there's some, but it's not enough to sustain a program at all. And when it is always funny when you see, especially the Hugh Freeze stuff at Ole Miss, but when somebody just shows up and commits to them out of the blue, and you're like, there's what is the deciding factor here? Because it is not football, and it is not. I want that Tennessee education. That's not what it's about, and it is always interesting that But here we are, and just terrible, shocking, appalling accusations. I hope they're not true, Tom, because giving money to people out of from McDonald's bags is just, you would think maybe Chick-fil-A, but then of course you can't give money on Sundays.
That's true. That is true. That's yes, there's downside there. And yeah, I mean, Tennessee's a weird job. Like, Tennessee's a weird job. It's a weird state because it's a state where I mean geographically, also in other ways, but geographically, because it's such a narrow but long state, and Knoxville's kind of a lot, on the east side, and a lot of the talent's in Memphis, which is on the west side, and it's like, yes, it's in the same state as Tennessee, but also there's like 5 SEC programs that are as close to Memphis as Tennessee is, and you have to drive past a bunch of places that have won national championships more recently than Tennessee has in order to get to Tennessee. Like, yeah, it's not fantastic. And Clemson's not that far from Tennessee. You've got they can't really hit Atlanta because everyone's hitting Atlanta now. I mean, it's just that is not as good a job as Tennessee fans think it is. And I saw Clay Travis suggest that he should be in charge of the search committee, which okay, all right.
It worked out the last time.
I'm sure it's gonna go great. You go right ahead. That'll be fantastic. Who is the dumber version of a Derek Dooley hire? And we're about to find out.
Where are Michigan and Tennessee similar? Because they do produce talent in those states. Maybe on a similar scope, but also other schools are coming after those players. They are 90s based and 80s based in terms of their last really, really great success. I think they're kind of similar. And if you consider Michigan to be like Tennessee, do we consider Tennessee a national title contending program anymore? Have we?
I don't know. I mean, the last time Tennessee was nationally relevant, when was the last time they were in the SEC championship game? I mean, have they been in the SEC championship game for 10 years? Feels like that's just been Georgia and Florida, and then a couple Mizzous thrown in there. Yeah. They haven't been competitive in a long time, because you can start going back through coaches. It's like, nope, he was never good. Nope, he was never good. I mean, let's go
Fulmer
back. Jeremy Pruitt.
08.
Yeah, Fulmer was fired in 08, 09, something like that. So yeah, but after that, it was 1 year of Lane Kiffin, right? Mm-hmm. And then Derek Dooley, and then Butch Jones, and then Jeremy Pruitt, and like what was the high watermark there? Was it the miraculous win over Indiana in the Gator Bowl last year? I mean, it honestly might have been. Butch Jones had a couple of years where, like, yeah, there were maybe 8 wins, but then they just got absolutely drubbed by Florida and drubbed by Alabama, where it was like, well, the schedule lined up just right, and you're an 8-win team. And yet, no, I think they are very similar to Michigan in a lot of ways. And Michigan and Tennessee are basically Nebraska, but with better recruiting territories. And they're not great recruiting territories, but they're at least better than Nebraska's. That there's a whole class of those teams. And, Florida State is those teams with a better recruiting territory at this point, probably, with much more recent success and a much better recruiting territory. But, it's been a while since Jameis left, and hasn't been a whole lot since then. So
I think the biggest win for Tennessee in like the last decade plus would be when Lane Kiffin got a commitment from New Keith Richardson over Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, nothing happened with that commitment. He ended up just looking now at to go to like Coffeyville Community College. And, that's also the state of recruiting at Tennessee back then as well. So that is, it'll be interesting to watch. I don't know who would want it. Who would want that job right now? It's going to be a complete Chernobyl. You've got to clean from the ground up and put a gigantic lid over the hole in the ground that has been created by all of this.
Well, and what's the NCAA fallout from this going to be? Because the school has now come out, in order to not pay Pruitt his buyout, the school has to come out and admit a bunch of NCAA violations. And that's going to be, I mean, you're probably looking at scholarship reductions. You're probably looking at bowl bans, because this is not like, the NCAA has to dig this stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
The way the NCAA gets you is if you go to the NCAA hat in hand and say, here are the things that we did, because the NCAA does not have subpoena power. So the NCAA is not going to find this stuff on their own unless you have a whistleblower, or you go to them hat in hand and say, here is the stuff that we did. Sorry about that. Please don't please don't slap us on the wrist too hard. And then you have to hope they're not going to slap you on the wrist too hard. I mean, I would assume there's a bowl ban. I would assume there's scholarship reductions. And, so then you have a year where you have, kind of the year zero, where there's just like, you're starting from absolute scratch, and then year one, and then year two. And the problem is, by the time you get, 3 years into your time, like maybe you're starting to get back towards bowl eligibility again, maybe, but, Dan Mullen's doing okay at Florida. Georgia's probably one of the 5 best teams in terms of talent in the country. Kentucky, like Mark Stoops, is like fine. Missouri is presumably going to be okay under Drinkwitz. Like, and it's like, this isn't an unbelievable division. This is the easier half of the SEC. South Carolina's got a new coach who's starting a little ahead of where you are as Tennessee. I mean, it's like, where show me the, Vanderbilt. Okay, you're going to beat Vanderbilt, and I don't even remember who they hired to replace Mason, but you're gonna beat Vanderbilt, and you're gonna win your 2 of your 3 out of conference games, or 2, 3 of your 4. Okay, that's 4 wins. Like, show me the other 2, like, that you're gonna be able to consistently get just to get to 6-6.
Yeah,
and I think the problem there. This is the old, like, happiness in life is the difference between your expectations and your results. Like, if you're expecting 4 wins and you get to 7. It's like, wow, what a fantastic season. This is Indiana football going 8-4. Like, wow, what a great year. If Ohio State football goes 8-4, it's like, wow, this is terrible. They should burn everything down. Tennessee has 8-4 expectations and like 5-7, like a 4-8, 5-7 program right now. And that is not a recipe for long-term success or happiness.
Yeah, you figure they're going to be fighting with South Carolina to be the number 6 team in the East for the next 3-4 years. And who knows, that we don't know South Carolina's trajectory. It could be very good and leave Tennessee behind. We'll see. But that is our Tennessee Volunteers chat. Thank you all for joining us there. It's always fun to talk about the Orange Bloods of the nation.
Oh, we forgot to mention my very favorite part of this story, which was the officially vetted letter that the had to have been seen by, I don't know,
yes,
30 people in the athletic department. That was the official letter to Jeremy Pruitt notifying them that he had been fired. And I mean, must have been looked at by Phil Fulmer, must have been looked at by the university president, must have been looked at by multiple lawyers, and it had the wrong year on it. It's a January 18th or January 17th, 2020. Like, the attention to detail, Tennessee, go big orange.
Maybe that's why they refused to play him, because the check that they wrote had the 2020 date on it, and the 180 days had passed, and there was no longer a valid check. So maybe that's where they got that from. Yeah, that's how expected.
It's real on brand. I mean, it doesn't say great things about your brand, but it's real. The nicest thing I can say about Tennessee is they are extremely on brand right now.
So have fun with that one. It'll be interesting to watch to see what happens there. So, Tom, do we have anything else before we get out of here?
Unless we want to start doing deep dives on Missouri football, I think we should probably get the heck out of here.
Yeah, well, you can go ahead. And as you start, Tom, I'm going to get the heck out of here. So
Mookie Cooper, Ohio State. We talked about Ohio State wide receivers transferring. Mookie Cooper transferred to Mizzou. And, I mean, he will probably be a pretty good impact player for them there, I would guess.
Wan'Dale Robinson leaving Nebraska and ending up at Kentucky.
Kentucky, correct.
So, speaking of slot receivers, I believe I saw that Tate Martell was coming back to Miami. Is that correct?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't seen that. I didn't hear my siren go off on my laptop for my Tate Martell news alert, but man, if so, big if true, as the kids say.
But we'll see if that happens, because I could have misread that, or it could be absolutely true at this point and then be a complete lie tomorrow, based on everything we know about the situation. So that will do it then. Thank you guys for listening, and just a reminder that this is the off season, but things certainly are not slowing down. Especially on the Ask the Insiders board at BuckeyesScoop.com, where, as I said, if you had been a member, you would have found out about Thayer Munford, days ago. There is all kinds of there are all kinds of things happening right now as we head into off-season workouts. Although I don't think people are back on campus just yet. Ryan Day wanted everybody to have a break, but people will be arriving eventually. Spring is not very far away. There is still some recruiting stuff going on with JT Tuimoloau, so that is something to keep your interest up as well. And right now, the board is very active, just discussing all of the possibilities of next year, who's coming, who's going, and what that means for 2021. So if you're not yet a member, I'd suggest giving it a try. Try for a month, see if you like it. I bet you will. And Tom, who you got on the Morning Scoop tomorrow?
I have Ross Fulton on the Morning Scoop. He is our X's and O's guy at Buckeye Scoop. We'll do a little bit of a look at the Ohio State offense from the national championship game, but we know everyone is probably more interested in looking forward. So kind of what this might mean for Ohio State schematically to have someone like Chris Olave back, have Jeremy Ruckert back, have Thayer Munford back, sort of the more schematic side of things. How might this change what they're doing with a new starting quarterback going into the new season?
I look forward to it. Do you?
I do. I always look forward to having Ross on the show. Ross is one of my favorite guests and one of the people who we get the most consistent positive feedback on his episodes. That it's always very informative. It's always a fun listen. And you always come away from a Ross episode a little smarter than when you started listening. So that's always a good thing.
Tom, you mentioned positive feedback with the Morning Scoop. Who are some of your guests you received the negative feedback for?
I did have one of our more recent 5-star reviews was just hey, it's a great show, but you have Tony on a lot. And it was like, that was the week of the Michigan game where there was a lot going on and new news breaking every day. And you were the logical guest to have on a lot. But, we want to service our audience and provide what they're looking for. So we will give you what you want. And that is less Tony. You're welcome.
The thing is, I don't ask to come onto the show. You ask me, and then I'm the one that gets the brunt of. Okay, enough with Tony. We get it. Okay, can you just do something else? Like I'm the one. Like Tom, can I please be on Thursday's show? I have never once asked to be on your show. I will never ask to be on your show. Not because I don't like doing it, because if you tell me no, I will be crushed. And you have told me no before. I'm like, hey, did you need me? No, I got Ross. No, I got this guy.
We've done, I don't know, at this point, probably 150 episodes or so. I've been on all of them. No one's complained once about having about me. So I don't know. It sounds like a you problem. Don't know what to tell you.
Alex Gleitman. Hey, can you do the show? Sure, I can do it. I look forward to it. Oh, I've cut you. I've got Pete Thamel and Adam Rittenberg. Oh, thanks, Alex. Appreciate it. You know what? Enough of these podcasts. I'm not doing them anymore. Thank you all for listening. We will talk to you on Thursday as we discuss the defensive guys who are coming and going. Please look forward to that. I know I just quit the show, but I am back. So praise be to me for returning to the show. Tom will also be here. I don't know how you feel about that. So we will talk to you guys later. Have a good one.